This is a Step Beyond the Fire podcast. My name is Cully Lord. I'm a land manager and a wildlife biologist here in my home state of Florida. I invite you to join me on a journey as I seek to document the little-known stories told by those who use fire for the benefit of the land, also known as prescribed fire. So come on, let's head into the field and meet the people where the flame ends and new life begins.
Hello again. This is Steve Miller, still guest hosting for Cully, and welcome to A Step Beyond the Fire. Today I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Rick Dolan, and we're going to talk a little bit about fire leadership. And so as an introduction, Rick began his career in 1993 as a forest ranger with the Florida Forest Service, then called the Florida Division of Forestry. He was quickly promoted to the senior ranger for the Goethe State Forest. And then in 1998, after the big fires, Florida established wildfire mitigation teams. And Rick was the first forest area supervisor for the mitigation team in Bunnell, Florida. And then he transferred to be a traditional forest area supervisor covering Alachua and Gilchrist County. He served in that role until 2010 when he became the forestry operations administrator in Gainesville, and then became the center manager for the Wakasasa Forestry Center. He served in that role from 2014 until 2023, when he became the director for the Florida Forest Service. He served on the Florida Red Incident Management Team for 21 years, working his way up from a division supervisor trainee to becoming the incident commander. And in that role, he's taken the team around the nation to respond to incidents. Oregon, Washington, North Carolina, and several assignments within Florida for fires and hurricanes. He's active on the National Association of State Foresters Fire and Awards Committee. He's served to train other people in incident management, especially through the complex incident management course. He's been on that cadre since 2009. He was a steering committee member from 2014 to 2020, and then was the course chair from 2020 until 2023, when his new duties as director called him away from that. And so we're going to chat about fire leadership and things. And Rick, thanks for being here. And I gave you an introduction, but why don't you sort of tell us your story about your fire career?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I appreciate this opportunity, Steve. It's good, always good to chat with you. You know, I've had a long journey. You know, I've been in my career now for just a few months short of 31 years, and starting at the very beginning on a bulldozer, you know, as a 20-year-old, and working my way up through the system and spending enough time in each job to be able to get proficient, I think, before moving on. And I had a few jobs in there where I spent some reasonable amount of time in the positions. And 2023 comes along, and I think I'm coasting toward the end of my career, and crazy things happened. And here I am now, the director of the Florida Forest Service, and I'm very proud of this agency and all that we do within the state and helping our partners and cooperators around the country.
For the listeners, Rick and I spent just about a decade, or maybe a little more, as the Rick was ops chief and I was his deputy, and you know, for the Florida Red team. And when we would go to incidents, I thought our team was always sort of especially cohesive and especially effective. Have you got thoughts about why you think our team functioned that way?
You know, I think, you know, early on, especially when you and I were in the ops section together, we worked under some very good leadership. You know, the incident commanders we worked for were really good. You know, we had a couple of different ones that you and I worked for over the years, actually 3. And, you know, they all had different leadership styles, but I think once we progressed, you know, pretty far up, We were very fortunate to work with Gary Beecham for a bunch of years, and he was a mentor for me personally in my day job, plus through incident management. And so I think the team kind of took on the reflection of the IC, right? And IC being very cool and calm and assertive and, and supportive. And the team functioned, I think, at a very high level because of that leadership that he provided us for many years before he retired. And you and I know, Steve, we've worked with other teams that, the team takes on the complexion of the incident commander, right? Incident commander is hair's on fire and is kind of scattered. The team kind of functions that way. It's kind of been my assessment, that your assessment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, building on some of your comments about Gary, one of the things I loved about Gary is when somebody would come and ask him a question, often his answer was, I got people.
It was.
And so what do you think about Gary's approach of I got people? First off, tell people what that sort of means, and then why does it make the team so effective?
Well, Gary was very smart, and smart leaders surround themselves with very good people, right? That they can lean on, especially during tough times. And good, effective leaders, they provide guidance, they support, they trust, and they empower their folks. And you'd be surprised, some people don't understand that. And he did. He got it. I mean, I worked with Gary for 20 years on a daily basis and worked for him for many of those 20 years. And I really tried to model my leadership style after him, kind of like what would Gary do in this situation. And he really, I know without a doubt in my mind, I would not be in the situation that I am in today in 2024 if it weren't for his guidance and leadership and trust and him empowering me to do good things. And all I tried to do was follow in his footsteps, which I did. When he retired, I slipped into the operations administrator job. Then a couple of years later, I ended up being the incident commander of the Florida Red incident management team. And I really just wanted to be like him because he was the model for me.
Yeah, when you said, what would Gary do? I could see us all with bracelets walking around of WWGD or I want to be Gary when I grow up kind of thing. He was an excellent person to work for.
Yeah. And, you touched on about us working together. And I think you and I have a lot of similar traits, but we also have some different traits that I think with us working together, I think I've known you for pretty much working in the day job and on the team almost 25 years now, maybe just a little short of that. And where I have weaknesses, it seemed like you had some strengths. I think when we worked together in the ops section, and then when I promoted up and became the incident commander of the team, it was a no-brainer for me for you to be my deputy because, again, good leaders surround themselves with really good people that can kind of fill in the gaps for them. And, that's one thing I always felt like you and I, over the years when you were my deputy incident commander, I would say something a certain way and I might get a little, fired up about something and you make me laugh and go, well, what Rick's trying to say, you would do that for me and, picking up on where I maybe had some shortcomings. And I think that's important in leadership is being able to reflect and understand, what your strengths are and more importantly, understand maybe what your shortcomings might be and surround yourself with those kinds of folks that can kind of fill in those gaps for you.
Yeah. Some people refer to the relationship you and I had as a yin and a yang. And when you went up to be the incident commander, I told you, you and I yin and yang pretty doggone well. And so if you want me to, I'll leave my favorite role of ops to be your deputy. And I agree with you. We could have a brief conversation in the morning, go about our daily business and come back in the afternoon and have a brief conversation. And pretty much we'd have each done the things, the way we did things is how we would have each wanted if we were doing it together. And some people might also call that trust. So how important do you think that trust, and ability to function separately but collaborate, how important do you think that is?
It's probably the most important thing. And in my professional career, I've worked for some people that maybe didn't trust folks as much as they should have, and it made it very difficult for us to see the mission out, right? And that's happened in the incident management world too. And I think that lack of trust is really it's a big deal. People are going to make mistakes. That's human nature, right? I don't call them mistakes. I call them opportunities to learn, right? You learn from your mistakes, and I can't remember the things that I've done well in my life, but I could surely tell you the things I've messed up, and try not to make those same mistakes again. So I call those learning opportunities. But I also think that comes with learning opportunities is accountability, right? So you don't need to keep doing the same learning opportunities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when I went back to get my master's in ecological restoration, I'd been working in managing land for about 26 years. So the rest of the students in the classroom thought I had all the answers. And I said, the clearest answers that I have absolute confidence in my answer are the things I did wrong and you should never do. And then I got a list of pretty good ideas that might work again.
Yep, I agree. I mean, I can't remember the things that I've done really well, but boy, I can give you the list of things I've messed up over the years. And then that's where reflection comes in, and you go, okay, it worked out, but man, I wish I would have handled this situation maybe a little bit differently, right? And I think that's the other piece of leadership that gets missed, is being able to look in the mirror and say, man, I messed that up. And I think that's one thing that really helped our team and you and I work so well together, is because the lack of ego. You check that kind of thing at the door, right? And by doing that, it's truly a team effort, because no one person has all the answers, and you're much stronger and smarter together. I did that with the incident management team, and now leading the agency like I am. That is my approach. It is a team approach. I might have the ultimate say so, but I'm certainly going to lean on the folks, and we're going to talk about it and come to the best decision for the agency, right?
Yeah, I like the way you said that. We check the egos, and I can, looking back on the assignments we've taken, one of the things that I don't know if we want to call them hosting agencies, when we would go and help them with whatever emergency they had, often said was that the level of customer service of the Red Team was amongst the highest. And do you think that comes from the concept that most of the team wouldn't show up with an ego?
I think so. I think it, again, it kind of goes back to the leader, and the team takes on the identity of that leader and that leadership style. But it's not just the Florida Red Team. We have 3 other incident management teams that we could send any of the 4 teams anywhere in the country. And I know when they come home that we're going to get letters or something saying how wonderful they were to work with, and they were helpful. We'd have them back anytime. And that was the philosophy that I think gets lost in some teams, is, when a team comes into a community to help them in their time of crisis, the last thing we need to do is make it harder for them. And, and I've always said that when my team leaves, I want the host or the agency we're working for to say, man, I hope we don't have another disaster, but if we do, I'd love to have them back. Right. And that's kind of the motto, I would say, for all 4 of the Florida incident management teams.
And thanks for grounding me on that, Rick. You're right. I speak in terms of the Red Team because that's where I spent most of my time, but I have deployed with each of the teams from Florida, and you are 100% correct. They all left the customers, so to speak, with a feeling of their issues were addressed effectively. Good customer service.
Yeah, when I'm getting proclamations from county judges this past summer in Texas declaring, red team or green team day, this, that, or the other, as an agency leader, it makes me so proud. And I love sharing that kind of stuff with the Capitol, and just highlighting the good work that our teams are doing and have consistently done for many years.
That's a cool story for getting letters from county judges.
That's a big deal, right? You know that.
Yeah, yes, because in much of Texas, they are the authority for emergency management. So yes, that's a big deal.
So when I got pictures of the ops chiefs holding Ricky Williams' Heisman Trophy, I think they've made some pretty good connections. I'll just leave it at that.
There you go. So you and I have gone to hurricanes and fires across most of the country, and when we show up, they're often difficult situations, or they wouldn't be asking for us to show up, and it's sort of optional, meaning we don't have to be on teams to do that. And when you get there, it's kind of stressful because you don't have all the information you want, you don't have all the tools you want. And so what motivates you to leave a comfortable home and go to some place where you're sleeping outside to help somebody else with a really difficult situation that you really don't have to manage?
I think it's a little bit of crazy, Steve. No, on a serious note, maybe there's a little bit of that, but I think I try to put it into this context. It's usually somewhere else, and if this were my community, I would want people to come help, right? And so, you know as well as I do, we spent many nights like sleeping in the front seat of pickup trucks and things like that, and under some pretty tough, circumstances, especially when dealing with hurricanes and natural disasters like that, because you may not have accommodations for several days, and it's really tough. But that may seem tough to you, but there are people that are having a lot worse day than you are at that point. And so I think that's the message as a leader. You gotta push that across to your team that it may not be the ideal, but eventually you're going to go home and it's going to be ideal. And these folks that you're there helping, it's not going to be ideal for them for a long time. That was the biggest motivator, is being able to help our fellow, citizens of the state of Florida and around the country. The other piece of it is I've always had the desire to learn and be better, and every one of those, especially the natural disasters and fires, to some point there's a little bit of difference in them, and it's a learning experience, on each one of those. And so I'm always learning. I've been doing this stuff for a minute, and I learn something new every single day. And I think that's the other piece of it, Steve, second, other than helping people, is just wanting to learn and grow as a person.
In November of 2016, you and I took the team to North Carolina, and they were in a pretty tough spot, and we ended up staying there over Thanksgiving. And the people of Morganton, North Carolina, poured out everything they could to try and make us feel welcome over Thanksgiving, and worrying about us Florida boys and so they were delivering stocking caps because it was going below freezing and kind of stuff. Is that common, or do you think that was an unusual event to have that much community support?
Yeah, the support was almost overwhelming. I mean, we get support where we go, typically, for the most part, and it's greatly appreciated. But that Thanksgiving of 2016 in that region of western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, that had record fire seasons where Gatlinburg is about to burn down, and they're calling in incident management teams from Oregon and all of our federal partners in Florida, and it was during the Thanksgiving holiday, and it was unbelievable the support we had from the community. You couldn't go anywhere. I mean, the incident was providing meals for us, right? But you couldn't go anywhere, and people are wanting to buy your meals. They're leaving notes under your windshield wipers of your truck, thanking you. They're delivering pallets of water and socks and all kinds of things to the incident command post. I mean, it was really, at one point, it looked like a stock room of a grocery store at the ICP. And finally, we had to say, hey, enough's enough, because it created almost an incident within an incident. Please take this to the local fire department, kind of thing. That's how I remember it. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, we had to set up a separate logistics section to manage the donations. And yeah, they were so generous in looking out for us that we were able to work with the local fire departments and food pantries to get it to some of the people who were out of their homes because of the fires and stuff. So,
yeah, and you mentioned it being, I think in my career, that's the only Thanksgiving that I have missed in my career was in 2016, and you touched on it, and you're 100% accurate that the local community wanted to make sure that we were comfortable and welcome, and were trying to overfeed us, and it was, and we made it a family thing, amongst the team. That's how I remember that, that it wasn't that awful tough.
You said family thing, and so you and I were at a meeting together in the Panhandle 2 weeks ago, and Carl Taylor comes up and sees me from across the room and pretty well runs over and hugs me because he hadn't seen me in 5 years. And so Carl serves on our team for the listeners. And so it is kind of a family thing.
Yeah, it really is. And, it's the team, people are proud to be part of the team that they're on. And, and I'm taking that concept personally and trying to push that, across our agency and shift the culture a bit, back to that family culture, where we got to look after each other. There's a lot of important stuff we do. There's a lot of dangerous stuff we do, and we take some things for granted. And it's really important for me to have that kind of culture, that family first culture here. And we all work hard, and we all overwork ourselves, but also finding that balance between your work life and your home life is very important. And unfortunately for me, I didn't learn that till probably about 5 years ago. And so the first 25 years of my career, I missed a lot of birthdays and anniversaries and things, and it served me well in my career. But, you don't get those kinds of things back either. It's really a balance anymore, and people are dedicated and they appreciate, I think that subtle shift in culture of what we're trying to do right now.
So to the audience, in 2018, I was leaving Florida trying to migrate to Milwaukee to go to work for the U.S. Forest Service. And while my wife and I were in Milwaukee picking out a house, Rick called and said that she was supposed to respond with the team because I wasn't available because of the relocation. So my wife goes out with Rick and the team to Oregon working in finance. And that was her first real big assignment. And, she came back with this sense of, I want more of that because of the, whether you call it team spirit, family dynamics, whatever. And so my compliments to you in looking after her. And, you made a devotee to supporting IMTs because of the way you managed it.
Yeah, she's come a long way in 5 or 6 years, hasn't she? And the only thing I wish I could have done differently on that is I wish you could have been there too, to be there. That's the whole, the ironic part of it is that you've been on, more deployments than I have probably in our careers, and you missed her first one,
Yeah. Yes. Well, and it was especially challenging for me because you guys were going and I wasn't.
Yeah, we were going to, you're right. And we were going to Oregon. It's not like we were taking a fire in, South Florida or something. We traveled to, Southwest Oregon and helped our partners out there at the Oregon Department of Forestry. It was a really a great trip, and it was a good experience. And I'm glad that Mrs. Miller had a good experience from that.
Yeah, you guys spoiled her. So, complex incident management course. You've dedicated a lot of time and energy to it, and you're recognized as a leader. You chaired it. And yet this is sort of another one of those times when it's a commitment over and above your day job, so to speak. What's so important to you about having good leadership on IMTs that you devote that much time and energy?
We have an obligation, right? We have an obligation to train our replacements. If we don't, we're gonna go backwards. And it's a tougher environment right now, since say 2014 or 15. So let's say the last 10 years, we're seeing fire activity that we've never seen before, right? These big fires across the landscape that are record-breaking things, right? And then every year it seemed like it's happening. Look, we were lucky to have a little bit of a reprieve this past summer, but we have to train these folks up, right? And I'm going on my 15th year being on that cadre, complex incident management course, type 1 training, geared toward the states, but we certainly have our federal partners come through it with us, and it's great when they're in the classes with us. And I was fairly young in my career. I was a 15, 16-year employee at that point, and it was an opportunity for me because I was working with a bunch of 30-year folks, and I learned so much in my career, much like how to lead from Gary Beecham to how to, navigate the national system and really pick up on the different things that some of the other states were doing. And, for that complex incident management course, the cadre is made up of people from 15 or 20 different states, right? And there's different ways that people handle business, and the relationships that were built out of that course for me has helped me in my career tremendously. There is no doubt that there's no way I would be where I'm at without the connections and relationships. And there's trust, when you get a deputy state forester that you've coached with in SIMC calling you going, hey, can you come to our state office and build our capacity up? Oh, I need you to be the acting fire chief for a week for a state out west, 2,500 miles away. That goes all the way back to that trust and empowerment, and and it's all about relationships, and that doesn't happen a lot. And I've been truly blessed with those opportunities, to go out there and spend weeks at a time in leadership roles in other state forestry agencies, and being able to fill in the gaps for them. And yeah, it's just it's been a blessing, that course. And with the whole shift to complex incident management, nationally, right, from type 1 training, the demand for the course is higher than ever. So I've had to step down from being, the steering committee chair and coordinating the course because I have a fairly full plate, as you know, Steve. Yeah. My calendar is ridiculous, but I'm still going to remain a cadre member. I've got that blessing from above me. And, if I have a conflict, I won't be able to make it, right? But if I can do it, I'm going to stay involved because I think it's that important, even at the level I'm at now.
Yeah. As I was listening to you talk about the people from whom you learned, and it's sort of like, I heard somebody once say it's like seasoning gumbo. Somebody helps you season your gumbo, so now you know how to help somebody else season their gumbo.
Yeah, and hopefully they make your recipe even better, right?
Yeah.
That's the hope,
Yeah. So You alluded to the wildland fire challenges being bigger and setting records. And so the commonly used word that I hear is unprecedented. Things are getting more complex. So, what are the kinds of things we're going to need to do in a world that seemingly is going to have unprecedented challenges?
I think in the fire service in general, I'm speaking in general terms, and I believe it's this way. And talking to our counterparts in other states, that the whole recruitment and retention thing is an issue with firefighters. And so how do we incentivize that? One, to get good people into the system, and then, there's only so much money, right? And so how do you retain those folks as well? And then how do we keep our experienced folks just a little bit longer so our new folks get a little more experience under their belt? Personally, this is the issue we're having in Florida. We've got a pretty young firefighter base, and I think that's probably something you're seeing across the nation,
So, I just had the privilege of working with some of your staff, Mike Work, and some folks out of the Jacksonville office to host the Interagency Prescribed Fire Training Center's Agency Administrator Workshop. And so those are typically non-fire people who have to manage programs that have a significant fire component. And I watched your staff share their lessons and the experience and show them the fruits of the labor. And I can assure you that the student evaluations we got yesterday were all very favorable about how well things ran. And similarly over on the Osceola National Forest. And so the efforts to have people prepared are paying dividends, and they're sharing their experience, and it was certainly appreciated. So thanks for making them available.
Well, it's really nice to hear our folks doing good things. And I know for sure, being a field guy for most of my career, that we have a lot of talent. And I know as the director of this agency, I'm blessed to have a lot of really good people. I just want to hold on to them as long as we can, and let some of these new folks, and we need to hold the Mike Works and folks like that a little bit longer to let these 5 and 8 year guys become 13 and, 17-year guys, right? Or whatever. And because let's face it, especially here in Florida, we haven't had a really bad fire season since 2011. And so, this is 13 years now. And, a fun little fact for Florida is 81% of our first line forest rangers have 10 years or less. I'm not the best at math, Steve, but that's less than 13. So none of them have been through a really bad fire season. Now, have they been on fires and fought fires? Yes, we have 2,200 fires a year in Florida. That's a pretty good number. That's our average for the last 5 years. But a year like 2011, that number may have been 3,500 or more, right? And in 1998, it was over 5,000. But these guys haven't seen that, and as an agency leader, it's concerning. So it's our job as leaders to prepare and train these folks to the best of their abilities and our abilities to ensure their safety and that they're doing the best for our folks in Florida.
Yeah, so I couldn't help but chuckle your description of bad fire seasons and that meeting we were in with the state wildland fire chiefs, managers, and supervisors. The fire chief from Louisiana started 3 weeks before, as he referred to it, as the devil opened the gates of hell and dropped me in kind of thing. And he was so appreciative of all y'all who sent resources and experience to help through the compact and state sharing state kind of thing. And so my hat's off to you and that sort of community that helps one another.
I'm proud to do it. We're one of the larger state forestry agencies in the country, and it feels really good to be able to send help to, a state like Louisiana, who's never had a fire season like this. They've never had incident management teams in their own fires, I don't believe, until this year. And like you say, there's a fire chief that literally has been in the job for 3 weeks. And, we rallied around them, we being the Southeast. I mean, there were, fire chief from South Carolina slipped in there to give him help. We sent an incident management team from Florida and boosted them up and provided them some guidance and some things to think about. And, there's an after action review on Louisiana that, they went through a couple of weeks ago, and I think we can do even better. I think we did a really good job as the Southeast, region to help them. It wasn't just them. It was Texas and it was Mississippi. And then guess what? The end of the year, Kentucky and Virginia had teams, and North Carolina got busy, and so did Tennessee. And so it's really weird that that the Southeast is the highest planning level in the country. That never happened, right? Have you ever seen that?
We go back to that word unprecedented, Rick.
Right. And so, so I think about it and I'm like, okay, but, again, that's that reflection, after action, talk about what we did right, what we can do better. And we got some really good ideas that if Louisiana gets hammered again next year, we're going to do better. We're going to send them more stuff. We're going to send some more experienced fire personnel in there to kind of back them up, much like the Western states like Oregon did with me. Hey, we have the eclipse coming in 2017. The eclipse is coming. We expect 2 million additional people. Rick, can you come work in our state office? Because we think we're going to have a significant fire problem, right? That's being proactive. And I think as fire leaders, we need to do that. We need to be thinking outside the box and bring those folks in to strengthen our teams up, whether it be, I'm not talking about incident management team. I'm talking about, agencies,
Yeah. So I know you've got something coming up on your schedule. So let's sort of wind this down with you sharing your parting thoughts that you think the audience needs to know.
Wow, that's a pretty good one there, Steve. I think leadership, and this is kind of what we've been talking about, our leadership and our times together and, over the years and incident management and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's really, really simple. And I mentioned it earlier. If you're going to be a good leader, you got to give that clear expectation. You got to give them support and guidance. You have to trust them. You have to trust them and then empower them to do good work. It's really that simple. And don't overcomplicate it. That's really my parting shot here, when it comes down to leadership.
So we can close it sort of like we started it in the lessons of the great Gary Beecham, which is, remember, you got people.
You got people.
So
That's
thanks,
exactly
Rick.
Right. I appreciate the time, Steve.
And this was Rick Dolan and Steve Miller going a step beyond the fire.